Hi, welcome back. This is Module 6 of TOGAF 9.1 Enterprise Architecture Overview course. In this module, we are going to cover the transition planning iteration of the TOGAF architecture development method. Transition planning iteration is where the methodology advises us to really get serious about implementation concerns and considerations and guides us to arrive at context-specific approaches that delivers best outcomes for the organization. The iteration itself is composed of two phases. Phase E, which is referred to as the opportunities and solutions phase, and phase F, referred to as the migration planning phase. This is where architecture moves from a broad brush strategic and enterprise level abstraction to an implementation focused solution level abstraction, which then becomes implementable through one or more projects within the portfolio of enterprise initiatives. These initiatives are scoped, prioritized, funded, and managed outside the architecture capability, typically by an enterprise portfolio management team. In this iteration, stakeholders of these identified initiatives are engaged and a migration plan is created and communicated to each enterprise initiative in order to convey the part that each project should play in realizing the overall enterprise architecture vision. So with that background about this iteration, let's jump in straight and look at more details into what each of these phases achieve within this iteration. First, let's look at what phase E focuses on. The objectives of phase E are, first, to arrive at an initial version of a consolidated architecture roadmap. This is achieved by merging together the outcomes from the analysis done in phases B, C, and D. And then, secondly, to arrive at a set of candidate work packages that can be picked up and delivered by identified enterprise initiatives. And thirdly, to create an outline of the overall implementation and migration plan, which offers a shared understanding of how the architecture will be implemented across the identified initiatives, and what constraints, dependencies, etc. will impact on them. Given these objectives, the high-level approach taken for phase E begins with an overall assessment of the entities impacted by the change and their capability to transition to the target state. This is because the impact of the enterprise architecture changes typically spans across not only the enterprise in question, but also across multiple organizations that interact within the enterprise's ecosystem. Hence, the entities we talk about here include the enterprise as a whole, including the business, operations, and IT organizations within the enterprise, the suppliers, partners, vendors, and other extended organizations who are constantly interacting with the enterprise. This kind of assessment of these entities are focused on identifying, number one, the extent of impact on a given entity, and the role the entity is expected to play within the larger scheme of realizing the architectural objectives. And secondly, the extent to which the enterprise architecture team is able to influence and coordinate architectures across these identified entities. And third, cultural and other influences such as capability, technology, skill set availability, etc. form key components for this assessment. And any divisional or business unit level strategic initiatives that are planned or currently in implementation and are not in alignment with the enterprise architecture are identified, and so are any initiatives that are in alignment and hence could be leveraged and could accelerate the architecture adoption. Business constraints that may play out during or post implementation and can have serious impact on business objectives proposed by architecture or invalidate architecture recommendations in part or as a whole are also identified at this stage. This, for example, could be an anticipated regulatory change or any plans for mergers and or acquisitions of an enterprise, or the merger and acquisition of any of the other entities in its ecosystem, or any such major changes in direction that might impact these initiatives need to be probed and understood. The various implementation factors considered for realization of architecture need to be captured, and so should the implication of these factors. TOGAF recommends capturing these in a matrix referred to as the Implementation Factor Assessment and Deduction Matrix. This matrix serves as a repository and a reference to guide various implementation-specific architecture decisions. It holds the implementation factor considered, a description of the context and the implications of these changes. This phase also creates and uses consolidated gaps from previous phases of architecture development iterations and identifies solution building blocks to address the capability gaps that the architecture seeks to address. TOGAF recommends using a consolidated gaps, solutions, and dependency matrix to represent this information. Solution building blocks are further broken down into implementable chunks of work referred to as work packages. A straw man of the migration plan is created, capturing the dependencies, the sequencing, and the progression of work within and across various initiatives, indicating the coordination required to make it happen, and in order to communicate and elicit feedback that would enable further refinement of this migration plan. The transition and migration plan usually follows one of these approaches: a greenfield approach, a revolutionary approach, or an evolutionary approach. Consider this scenario. Fisicola, a fictitious organization which have very little automation applied to their supply chain capabilities, has conceived a novel supply chain solution based on intelligent sensor technology that leverages Internet of Things that could potentially enhance the efficiency of their supply chain by several orders of magnitude as compared to the existing manual processes. Although there are some integration required into other existing enterprise systems, the organization has identified that much of the implementation, including the required infrastructure and applications, need to be purchased or implemented from the scratch. In this scenario, a greenfield approach is expedient, literally spreading out a green field in front of the architect to build the target state architecture as he deems fit. Now, let's say the same organization hypothetically already have an implemented solution to manage their supply chain. And in this case, one of revolutionary or evolutionary approaches to migration may need to be taken to move the architecture from its current state to the envisioned target state. The revolutionary approach implies a big bang change, where you literally switch off one or more legacy solutions based on the current as-is state architecture and switch on a new solution that realizes the envisioned target state architecture. Various considerations come into play when deciding on approaches to be taken. These include efficiency of introducing the change, confidence in the new solution, the criticality of the systems, and the need for ensuring business continuity, change management considerations, business readiness considerations, and so forth. Owing to a mix of these factors, the revolutionary approach is usually not favored in most circumstances. Instead, most architectural implementations follow an evolutionary approach to realizing architectural changes. The strategy in this case is to continually spot opportunities and work through them to gradually converge towards target state. Most organizations prefer this approach because it enables transforming the architectural landscape while progressively mitigating risks and issues associated with the change. Following the identification of the migration approach, it becomes apparent if transition architectures are required or not. For example, if the enterprise adopts a greenfield or a revolutionary approach in a particular case, they may choose to proceed straight to the target state rather than taking an incremental approach. While they might still want to try out a pilot and choose to implement the solution incrementally, thereby testing and learning from the process, it also is possible for them to go straight away from the current state architecture to the target state. In the case of an evolutionary approach, however, the transition architectures are inevitable, and they represent waypoints in the architectural roadmap and represent intermediate stable architectural states that the architecture landscape will transition through. TOGAF recommends capturing architecture state transitions using a transition architecture state evolution table. Each transition state is designed to incrementally enhance the enterprise's capabilities, and these will be delivered through various enterprise initiatives. This incremental building up of capabilities through architecture increments across multiple enterprise initiatives are captured through architecture definitions increment table.